Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. On a previous video, I talked about the automatic quantity calculation for recurring invoices and how you can tie that to subscriptions, and I used Huntress as an example. One of the comments on that video, maybe the only comment on that video, was a question on how we can do this with the API. So I talked about how with integrations, we can import subscriptions automatically into Halo from PAX8 or other distributors, and then you can tie the recurring invoice line item from item to that count of subscriptions. And then that way, as the subscriptions automatically updated, the quantity on that invoice, recurring invoice, will automatically update, including variation settings and so on and so forth. So that was all manual. We were basically manually updating the subscription quantity if for Huntress. And the question was, how do we do this automatically using the API? I have a lot of videos on my YouTube channel from Roost. Roost is not a free product. It is a fantastic platform. I previously did a video on how to take apart an API and reverse engineer it using EasyPanel. And in that video, I used a platform called N8N, which is a RPA platform similar to Roost, but it is significantly less powerful. I spent the last couple of days creating an automation workflow inside of N8N to do the Huntress subscription quantity update, and I sincerely appreciated Roost during that moment. I cannot imagine I'll be doing many more videos on N8N, nothing too complicated at the very least, but I'm going to show you what I did. We're going to take apart the workflow that I built in N8N and how I'm using Halo's built-in customization options, whatever that word is. And how you can literally turn this into a very powerful PSA that's basically, you can do anything. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm using my pre-beta version of Halo. So if you do see something here that is not available to you, just hang tight. It will be available at some point. The current version, for reference, we're running is 2.132.6. Again, it is pre-beta, so if we go look at our release details, we can see that right now 132 is my current version, beta is 131, and actually 133 is coming out with new release notes. I'm really excited to read these because I haven't seen that yet. So we'll be able to see what else is coming. 132 has a lot of amazing features inside of it that are new, but let's not get sidetracked. Back into our Halo here. There's a couple things that we want to do. So we're talking about Huntress specifically still. And we can see that I have my Huntress platform up. I've got one total agent for my organizations. I've got two organizations. One has 0 agents and the other has 1 agent. So this one has 0 and this one has 1. They're both the same name. And we also have our API key that's already been generated. My browser just crashed. Here we go. Here's my API documentation from Huntress. We can see how to do that authentication. If we go here, look at the API overview, we can see authentication, and it's just a basic authentication. It's an authorization basic where the key is a combination of your public key colon private key converted to base 64. This is literally just how the basic authentication works. So we literally just do username, password, where the username is the public key, password is the private key, on a basic authentication, and then that API calls that we make using that authentication process will work. And here are the API endpoints that we can hit. We can hit organizations, and we get back a list of orgs. So this is the API we're going to be hitting in order to do this automatically. I forgot to open my N8N, but let me do that right now. And this is our Halo that we're going to be using with. So number one, first thing that that I really like to see about Halo is that Halo basically creates fields for every integration it ties into, and it maps the actual internal ID of the far end against every entity in Halo. And so that way it doesn't need to go look up and say, give me a lookup on blah, blah, blah. It actually knows the ID, it knows exactly what it's going to be looking for. So we're going to be mimicking that. The way we do that is we go to configuration, we go to our custom fields, and we create an organization or a customer custom field called a Huntress internal ID. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually configure that internal ID inside of Halo. So if we go look at our Halo customers and we go look at our Rising Tide 1 LLC and go over to our custom fields, we can see that we have the Huntress ID of 252980. Now, the other thing about this is that this is actually a URL, and I can click on it and it'll take me directly to the Huntress platform for that organization. So that is something that Halo allows us to do with the custom fields. Let me just go back and show you how we did that. If you go back to the configuration and look at this custom field, we can see that there's a hyperlink when in read-only mode, and we're using the $value, which is going to be used for, let me edit this real quick. It says use $value to substitute in the field current value. So I'm literally just putting in the field of that number, that internal ID. And we can go in here, we can edit and go flip over to our custom fields. And we can see that it's literally just the ID value. And then when it's in read-only mode, it's populating that with the URL. And again, I'm grabbing this because I'm going to here, I'm going to go to my organization and I see my IDs right here. I'm going to copy that and I'm just going to paste it into this field right here at that point. And that's basically all I need to do to then map. I'm creating my mapping of customer in Halo to organization in Huntress at that point. So that's the custom field, very simple. The next thing that we need to do is we need to start thinking about, okay, how do I actually retrieve the customer from that custom field? So there's a couple ways I can do it. I can take you through the API documentation in Halo, and I can say, hey, you can pull the customers, then you can loop through the customers and grab the custom fields. Then you can find the customer that has the custom field value set to blah. That is way too many API queries. I got to do the authentication. I got to then do the get all clients, and I got to loop through each client and filter down to where the custom field value is set to what I'm looking for. That's not going to work for me. So instead, I'm doing something different. Remember, if you've seen my other video about reverse engineering the API calls, one of the things that I talk about often is Halo. The interface for Halo is literally just an API wrapper. And everything that we interface with through this user interface, through the web application, can literally also be interfaced through the API directly, as long as we can reverse engineer it. So if you notice, we have over here a reporting module, and we can do whatever we want in the reporting module. We can literally just write raw SQL by coming to the data source and doing a custom SQL query, and we can basically start doing things like select star from area, which will give us a list of the customers. And notice if we do that, we also have custom fields. So if I come in here, as we build custom fields into the platform, they actually get stored in the database as a column. And so here we've got the custom field for CF Huntress internal ID, and we can see it's right here. And we can also add some additional fields that we want inside of here, such as, for example, area description or a area, which will be the ID. And then we basically have Huntress ID, Halo customer name, and Halo internal ID of everything that we're looking for. And we can just basically grab this and we can say where CF Huntress internal ID equals, and now we come back and we have our specific client with that Huntress internal ID. So now we're getting somewhere. So now what I'm going to end up doing is, again, everything I'm doing in this interface is using an API. So what I did is I reverse engineered the API calls to run this SQL. And now I can turn this into a single execution instead of looping through or collecting all clients, then looping through and finding it. Especially as you're dealing with a lot of clients, the SQL statement to run this kind of statement itself is very fast. Whereas running this across thousands of clients via SQL is still just as fast. If we run this across thousands of clients in the API, we're looping one at a time, and it's going to take about half a second to three-quarters of a second per client that exists, because it's per API call, and that's going to make the call exponentially longer. Let's stop talking and flip over to N8N. I need to log in, so let me do that. And notice I've got two Huntress API things. We're going to focus on the API version 2 here, and this is going to be the canvas of what we built right now. So first thing I'm going to do is, this is a manual workflow execution, but we can adjust this trigger to be something based off a schedule, or something like that. So we can do on schedule, on a webhook call, on form submission. We can do manually. This is manually. We could do on an app event. So something else firing off from a different integration that fires it off. So there's a lot of things that we can do to fire off this workflow. For right now, I'm just going to keep it manually for the purposes of this demonstration. I'm using the code. If you followed my previous video with N8N, I'm using this primarily to set some variables that I can reference again. So if I run this node, it's going to give me back a Halo hostname, and it's going to give me the hostname of Halo that I'm doing. So I can just come in here and update this at any time. and modify it for whatever Halo version I want or whatever Halo instance I want. At this point, I'm going to start making my API calls. So this call that's going to be made is going to reach out to Huntress, and it's looking at the organization's API endpoint. And notice I'm using generic credential type. It is basic authentication, as I mentioned before, and I'm specifying the Huntress Rising Tide Group API keys, which is the API key and private key. It's going to get used for the basic authentication. Notice if I'm coming back, I see my current page, the total number of items per page, and I can see item 1 and item 2, and here I got my agents count and my agents count 0 and 1, and I can see my internal IDs right here, right? And remember, I'm looking for the ID where 252980, and I know that because it's right here, 252980, so I can kind of start to put together how the API is working and what I need to do at this point, okay? Let's continue moving forward. I now have my API key. I want to select, this is a single object that's coming back. That object is 2 items. It's got the organizations, which is an array, and it's got my pagination. And we can see this clearly if we look at JSON right here. So here we've got my array. In my array, there's a single item. That single item is coming back with organizations. And inside organizations, I've got 2 items, 1, 2, and then I have my pagination, which again is another object that's including the number of pages, the total count, the limit, total count, again, current page count, the total count, and a limit per page. So what I need to do is I need to grab the organizations at this point. So I'm going to close this out, and I'm now selecting that organizations object from the Huntress endpoint. So if I execute this, I'm now coming back and I'm getting 2 items instead of just 1. So if I flip this over to JSON, we can see that we're looking at 2 items in an array directly. And we can see it from a table view, it looks just like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to loop through each of these organizations, okay? So we take that, we go to a loop, and we basically want to verify, hey, do we have agents in this loop? So number 1, do agents exist? If agents exist, we're going to basically look at the agents count. So if we look at previous nodes, we can come through. Actually, because I'm inside of a loop, we probably won't be able to see the inputs here at this point. But I'm basically looking at the agents underscore count, which we saw previously. If it's larger than 0, it's going to be true. If it's equal to 0 or less than 0, it's going to be false. If it's false, I'm flowing back up here to do nothing. I'm skipping this loop run, and we're going to keep going. Actually, probably what I need to do is just skip this entirely and reloop here at that point. So if it's false, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to go back and loop over the next item. And then if there are agents, I'm going to come here and I'm going to completely go here. And it's going to go through this loop until it's finished. So there's a loop and a done, right? So it's going to loop X number of times until it finishes all the items. And then it'll go to the done section where it's going to be finished at that point. So with that being said, I wonder if that's why it didn't work. Let's come back in here and actually execute the node and see what comes back. No, we still didn't come back with anything. That's fine. Let's go save that and let's see what happens. So we have our if condition to determine whether or not we have agents. If we do have agents, we want to now go back to Halo and say, okay, what do I do? Remember that SQL statement we made? So this query is actually going to be a API call to the API report endpoint. And then I'm going to pass through my credentials. In this case, Halo uses OAuth 2 for login. So we can look at this and we can see we're using grant type client credentials. We've got our URL, our client ID, our client secret, our scope, and so on and so forth. That's going to be used at each time it's going to be called HaloPSA apps. Every API call I make to Halo is going to reference that OAuth 2 API credentials. And then my body is where the magic happens. So in this case, I'm passing in an array of report information I want to run. And so I can see my SQL statement is pretty straightforward. Select LID, LCount, LDescription. So I'm basically going to start grabbing my license count where the Huntress ID equals the client in Halo Huntress ID. So I'm going to grab this SQL real quick and we're going to paste it into the reporting module of Halo. We can see what this looks like when we're running it in the report. So we're going to grab this. We're going to go all the way to the end. And we're just going to, everything else, it's here is part of the API call that we're making. It says API query ID 0. It's not an existing report. We're not testing it. And we do want to load the report if there is any results. So let's go back here and take a look at the reporting. And I'm just going to paste this in here. Oop, let me actually paste that. And I'm going to delete this part. So now we actually have the ID saved. And now I can just come back here and run this report. And we can see that we've got, well, let's delete the fields because this is not necessary. Let's go ahead and reload that. And boom, we can see that the license ID is 17. Currently the count is 1. The description is Huntress. The client ID is 19. And that we can confirm that the Huntress internal ID is here and the description of the client. This is the name of the client. So we're basically building a report that's going to give us the licensing, targeting the license that we want to. And we know that because if we go back to our SQL, we can see that we're actually focusing on where, let's actually, let's do from area. We're doing a join on the license. And we're saying where the license description is equal to Huntress. And we know that's the product that we're doing with. We're doing where CF Huntress internal ID equals an ID. So this is from the area. And so therefore, our goal is that if a license doesn't exist, we still want to report, we still want to return data for the client ID and information, but we want to return null values. So if we were to go back to Rising Tide and go to our subscriptions tab here, we can see that the Huntress one does exist with total licenses of 1. I can come in here and I can go ahead and delete this and say yes. And now I go back to my report, refresh the report, and I have null values here, but I still get some information back because I need to know the area number or the internal Halo record ID in order to create a new subscription. And I need to know that I'm doing it to the right one. So I'm capturing this, which is the Huntress ID, and the name of the client doesn't matter, but I'm pulling it just so we can see for our references that it's correct. In this case, let's go take a look at N8N. We get the report. That's the report being running. That's the report being run. We come back and we pull the values of that specific report rows. So when the report runs, it's going to return a large amount of JSON objects, but the only thing we care about are the rows that are returned within the report. So if we expand and look at that JSON value, we're actually looking at the report.rows, or we're looking at the specific rows, and it's going to return a row for each of the items that come back. We're going to do another if condition here, and we're going to say, does the LID exist or not? So if the LID, which is the license ID column from that report, if it comes back with a value, then we need to go and update the number of licenses that exists. Okay, so again, looking at this condition, we're saying if the operation is not empty for the license ID, in this case, right now, if we look here, it is empty because I deleted it, so it's a null value. Then if it's not empty, then go and take the true path up to update the subscription. In this case, the update subscription will run against the same Halo hostname using the software license API endpoint, using the same Halo credentials. We're going to go ahead and populate the client ID, the count, and the ID of the license based off of the report itself. And then if, and for some reason, the license does not exist, the subscription is not there, we're going to go ahead and create a new subscription using more information. In this case, we're setting the name, we're setting the billing cycle, the term duration, and so on. And this can all be populated automatically based on values from Huntress's API endpoint. Again, this is just a demonstration. It's not meant to be used live. There's a lot of things that you can do with this. With that being said, showing you how it's all done, let's go ahead and execute this and see what happens. So we're going through and we can see that the workflow executed successfully. We saw it pass through. We can see the check marks happening. We see the check mark down here. So that there was one false, but then there was one item true. We can see there's one item here, and we can see 2 items total, which is correct. We saw that on the Huntress platform. We saw 2 organizations. One has agents, one does not. For the one item that did happen, we were able to get the client by Huntress ID. We can come up here. We can actually see the results that happened. So here's the information that was true. Here we can see the output. This is the report that gets returned back. And remember, I said there's a lot of stuff in here. What we're looking for is the report, and we're looking for the rows, which is right here. You can see there is one row returned where the LID is empty, the L count is empty, and so on and so forth. Oops, we did not want to do that. Let's close out of here and go to the next pull values. And from here, we can see the input comes through, and we're actually going to collect and grab that one row based off the report.rows. And now we can see that one item, and it's very clearly the LID is empty, the L count is empty, and so on and so forth. At this point, we're going to go to create subscription, and we can see that this was successful at this point. And now we have the subscription that was returned. LID is now 18. If I go pull my report and refresh, it's now 18 with 1 count, description Huntress. And if I go look at my subscriptions, we can see that it was created automatically according to what we would expect. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to update this subscription manually, and I'm going to say it's 100 licenses, and we're going to save that. So now I'm going to come back here and I'm going to refresh my report, and I can see that now the L count is 100 as what I would expect since I've updated it manually. Now my schedule fires again and my workflow reruns. And at this point, we're going to see that, hey, it already exists. We're going to flow up here and we're going to update that subscription instead of creating a subscription. We can see the check mark has now flowed up here because the LID is not empty. We can see it's not empty. It's over here as 18. And now we can take that and build a payload where we're going to pass the LID in here. And we can see that LID is 18. Here's the information that was used. And we're going to come back and refresh this page where now we are back to 1 because we only have 1 agent in Huntress. And if you look at our report, it's back to 1. And so we've basically just showcased how you can build a workflow in N8N. We can run this on a schedule. It'll connect to the Huntress API for real. It'll update the subscription under Huntress for each client for real, as long as you map clients across from Huntress to Halo. So using that custom field that we created, again, it's under custom fields, you can populate under each client the Huntress ID, which you can grab from here, grab this, and then you can basically run the whole workflow, and it's going to loop through each organization, each client in Huntress automatically, find the correct one based off the ID you've mapped, and then update the subscription manually. Now, in terms of the custom field, you can build a workflow in N8N or Roost or PowerShell or whatever that will allow you to populate the custom fields in Halo automatically based off the fields in Huntress, based off the ID in Huntress, using something like the name matching or using something like some other value that you want to build. But if you take the name of the Huntress organization, do a search in Halo, find the first one that matches best, and then populate the custom field value from the Huntress one, and you can automatically create a mapping from Huntress to Halo that'll then allow you to automatically start mapping your subscription count, your quantity counts of your subscriptions from Huntress number of agents to Huntress, to Halo's Huntress subscription record. And then finally, if you really want to get fancy, you can dig further through the API and you can come back and start pulling a list of agents that exist and start populating those against agents themselves inside of Halo under the assets. You can add a Halo custom field under the asset referencing the Huntress agent ID and start populating that going based off serial number or some other kind of record that you can use to make sure that you specify which Huntress agent is going to which asset in Halo, which would then allow you to also map alerts automatically. So if an alert comes in from Huntress, you can fire a ticket into Halo and automatically assign the correct workstation or asset and so on and so forth. It's basically unlimited, which is the power of having an open API. And one of the reasons why I love Halo so much. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope it was educational. Let me know if you have any questions. And yeah, thanks for stopping by.